It's time to build a real app inside BASIC for Android. If you watched the MIT App Inventor chapter, then you understand about Color Spotter. If you haven't, it's a take on the old backseat game where people get to look for barn, horse, tractor, airplane, and pass the time on the road trip. Color Spotter is something similar, which allows you to look out the window and spot cars with different colored paint jobs on them. And once you've found all 6 colors, then you're a winner. So let's go ahead and fire up BASIC for Android. We end up one more time with the empty module here. Let's first of all go ahead and get rid of the message box. Tell the activity to load layout 1, and then let's do a save. And we'll come back up to the Documents menu. We'll create a new folder, and we'll call it Color Spotter 1. Go into that folder, and we'll call the file name Color Spotter. And click Save. Now, if you remember the previous Color Spotter, we need to create 6 buttons that represent the different colors of car paint that we want to look for. We need to create a label that says you win, when in fact you do win, and a button that says play again. So let's bring up the designer. And it's quite a bit easier to use the designer in BASIC for Android than it was to use the designer in App Inventor because it's a more powerful tool. So we begin by simply adding 6 buttons. Add View Button. We'll do that 6 times. And now we'll arrange those buttons. With App Inventor, you can put buttons exactly where you want them. You don't have to use different kinds of layouts. So we'll put button 1 in the upper left-hand corner, button 2 over here, button 3 there, button 4 down below that, button 5 there, and button 6. Now, if you remember before, we had to say generate members, so let's go ahead and do a generate members on each button. That will create the buttons themselves. And then we're going to go ahead and open up each button and generate a click for each one of those buttons. 4, 5, 6. Generate members. Now if we click Close and go back to the Color Spotter BASIC for Android text, you see we now have 6 click handlers. And if we scroll up to the top here, we have 6 buttons declared. So let's go back to the designer. We need to have the label that we're going to use to say you win. So we'll go to Add View and select Label. We'll drag the label down here on the screen, extend it over here to the right. We'll change the style of the label by clicking on this little plus here, changing its horizontal alignment to center. We'll change its font size to 24, and we'll change its text to say you win. And we'll change the color of that text to be bright green, chartreuse in this case. Go up to the Tools menu, Generate Members, click on Label 1, make sure that we generate that, so now we have a label we can talk to. And one more time, we'll come up to the Add View menu and select another button. This is going to be our Play Again button, so we're going to move that this way, size it to the width of the screen, make it a little smaller because we don't really need to make it as a button that you're tapping for as part of the game. We'll change the text of the button to say Play Again, and we'll change the font size to be 24. And now, as you recall from the previous chapter, we want both of these controls to be invisible until the users actually won the game. So we'll turn visible here to false. We can click down this way, or we can just double click and it'll switch back and forth between true and false. And similarly for our label, we're going to go ahead and double click on this. So now when we run this app, we'll end up with our 6 buttons and we'll end up with no label and no button visible. Now, it's a little different in BASIC for Android than it is in App Inventor, in that if you look through the properties here for a button in BASIC for Android, there's no way to directly include an image. So what we're going to do is do something quite a bit different. We're just going to go ahead and fill the background of each one of these buttons with a different color, and when you tap on it to select it, we're going to refill it with a color that's similar to the one we started with but dimmer, so that as you type each one, you know the ones that are brightly colored are the ones that you can select, and the ones that are dim are the ones that you've already selected. So if we go ahead and run this right now, let's go ahead and save the layout. We're going to call it Layout 1. Something you have to do at least once each time you do this. And then we'll come back to the Color Spotter. And we can see that we didn't generate a member for the Play Again button. So let's go back to the designer. Select this button, Tools, Generate Members, button 7, and click, and close. And now we have buttons 1 through 6, our label, button 7, and down here at the bottom, we have a handler for button 7. So we'll move Basic for Android out of the way here and bring the emulator to the front and give this a whirl. Let's try to run it. And there's our 6 buttons. As I mentioned, we're going to set the colors, but we're going to set them programmatically. So in the next movie, we'll talk about how to put all the code behind here in order to give us the functionality that we want to be able to set the colors in each button to our initial state, and also as you tap on each button in order to begin to win the game.